Awesome. Tim, can I get you to start the slides, please?
Yep.
So what you just saw here is one of our games called Magical Park, which we're selling to councils, which is a very new concept. And so today's talk, obviously we're talking about business incubators and how you can fund your game full-time working on it. And so we're not talking about augmented reality technology, we're not talking about gaming, this is all you're going to get in terms of that bit. So basically what we're going to talk about today is how you can use incubators, business incubators, to fund full-time working on your game. All the things that we've learned on our journey from the last year, we're going to try and share that with you as good as possible. And yeah, so I would like to introduce myself. Obviously, I'm Melanie Langlitz. I'm the CEO from GeoAir Games. To give you a bit of an idea about my background, I have spent 20 years in film and television industry, had 8 years of senior management experience. In 2011, I started studying for a degree in entrepreneurship and business. And part of that, working on and studying that, I developed the concept for how do I do mobile outdoor gaming. And that was driven by my stepdaughter, who was back then 7, who didn't want to go outside. She was addicted to mobile games, and every time I tried to get outside, we had a fight. So I thought, you know, how can I take gaming outside and make that possible? And that was the concept of GeoAir Games, what you see today.
Hi, I'm Amy. I'm the technical co-founder of GeoAR Games. I have been a recreational gamer for most of my adult life, but I also love the outdoors, so this idea, Mel's idea, made perfect sense for me. So today, I mean, we've had a pretty whirlwind last 9 months going through a couple of accelerators, and we'll attempt to break that down for you into a useful analysis of how can you actually fund full-time development.
So Amy and I met at a different startup called Ogview, and Ogview used geospatial augmented reality. And what you see here is basically they used it to make underground infrastructure visible to road workers. But what ended up happening was that Ogview didn't make enough money to sustain the 14-people team. So a lot of us got made redundant, and that also meant that Amy and I got made redundant, which wasn't great. But what it basically sparked was that Amy came to me and said, hey, I really like your idea, let's do this. Let's work on this, let's make it happen. And so I took my redundancy, which luckily basically covered the first 4 months of my salary, of my cost.
Yeah, so Mel had redundancy insurance, which was really lucky for her. And I was lucky enough to be able to continue working at Allview in a part-time capacity. So that's sort of how we funded the initial development stages. But at some stage, you know, you get internal funding, whether it's part-time work, part-time work, rich parents, a supportive partner. Eventually that's going to dry up and you're going to need some external sources of funding. And that is where business accelerators can come in. So a traditional accelerator model will invest into your company. They will put some money in and they will expect some equity in return. But as well as the money, they will give you an intense period of mentoring and development. So this can be anywhere from 3 to 12 months. It can be on site, they might provide office space for you, or sometimes they are carried out remotely. And there's often an ongoing advisory capacity once the accelerator is finished. And also the opportunity to pitch your idea to a bunch of investors at the end as well. So that's your typical accelerator model.
So in September last year, Amy and I launched GeoAir Games, and then we had 2 months of just running around meeting advisors, asking what our game should be looking like, you know, where on earth are we going to get funding? And one of those meetings was with Stephen Knightley, who you all obviously know from NZGDC. And Stephen said to me, apply for S Factory. And we were like, what the heck is that? And it's like, it's a business incubator. What are we going to do there? What is a business incubator? Well, let's apply anyway. Stephen thinks it's a good idea. Let's do it. So, yeah, we applied.
So S Factory is actually a little bit different to the traditional model. They take no equity. They are a government-funded and run accelerator incubator supported by the Chilean government. And instead of actually giving you a cash lump sum, they will reimburse your costs, so there's a bit of administration involved.
And so, you know, it seemed like we were getting 15,000 US dollars for free. And when I told my friends and family that we were going to go to Chile, South America, and getting 15,000 US dollars for free, do you know what they said? You're crazy, you're gonna get killed, you're gonna get kidnapped, it's a scam. And I was really nervous. And then, basically we got the acceptance letter. We got the acceptance letter that said, you know, like, hey, actually, is that your one? No, that's my one. Yeah, so basically, you know, like we were accepted and it was all good, and it was actually a bigger part of Startup Chile. And Startup Chile is actually very well known in the industry. It's got loads of different types of incubators. But, you know, no, that is yours. Yeah, you carry on.
Okay, I carry on. So they provide 90% of the funding, so we had to go on with 10%, so you do have to have some sort of cash reserves. Money is covering flights, your basic salary for 3 months, project costs, but only 84 days. And what they didn't tell us was that there were 3 weeks before you're expected to be there and 2 weeks after, for which your costs wouldn't be covered. So there are some hidden costs in this, but again, $15,000 no equity, it's pretty good. It allowed us to purchase all the hardware we needed for development, so we didn't have much hardware apart from personal computers at that stage. Yeah.
So, Startup Chile, oh now I'm kind of like back on track, yeah, missed something. So basically here's a bit of a run over how the time in Chile actually went. So as Amy just kind of like said, 84 days is what you basically get covered. But they wanted you to kind of like get there earlier than that. So they tagged on 3 weeks at the front and 2 weeks at the end, which meant that, you know, you got your acceptance letter and then you were expected to be in Chile 4 weeks later. That also meant that, you know, you only had 4 weeks to process your visa. So it just alone, for those people who've ever had to go through the process, you need a criminal record check, which alone takes 4 weeks, and then process your visa. So, you know, I basically arrived a week late, which ended up being a good thing, because we didn't realize that the only cost that we would get reimbursed was actually for the 84 days, not the 3 weeks prior, not the 2 weeks after. And the other thing is, so you need to have, you know, like a decent amount of stash of cash to front up all the cash, and that means that you also have to spend the 15,000 US dollars in those 84 days, and everything has to be tracked. So we didn't get reimbursed for the 15,000 US dollars until 2 months into the program, and that can really, really be critical for a lot of teams who end up there and have no money left anymore. So overall, though, Startup Chile was amazing. Like a beautiful open space office, absolutely gorgeous, loads of international other startups. You bond really well. Nobody speaks English outside, you know, like of the office, so you really, really bond with each other. And the workflow pretty much looks like 2 days, every 2 weeks you have a workshop day. So it's 2 full days with workshops, and the rest of the time you can manage your time whichever way you want. You can work in the office, you can work from home, it really doesn't matter. There is a lot of rooftop parties, which is really great to mix and mingle, and every day at 5 o'clock there is fresh croissants in the office, which is even cooler. So Startup Chile was really, really amazing, a great experience.
So there were a lot of reporting requirements for getting reimbursed, and a lot of the girls who were there actually had trouble getting all the accounting requirements together. So as far as I know, they were there for quite a while after the end of the program, just trying to tidy up those accounts. And you can see Mel there with Rocio, who was her friend over there and helped with the accounts, and that's the accounts folder, full of receipts and forms. It took a month to get the accounts in order, and when you combine that with a month at the start of trying to get all your paperwork in order, Mel really only had 1 month in the middle to do some serious work on the company. So it's $15,000, but it's a lot of administration. So
halfway through Startup Chile or S Factory, we started thinking about what's next, what after that. We need to continue to fund ourselves. How are we going to do this? We're far from making money and revenue, so what are we going to do? And on one of the rooftop parties, I bumped into a Lightning Lab alumni who said to me, why don't you do Lightning Lab? You know, it's really cool, but it's nothing like Startup Chile, you know, like it's way more intense. The first 5 weeks you won't, you know, it's really crazy. Basically, you're going to meet with so many mentors, you won't get any work done. You really need to focus on what you want to achieve in that program. It's really tough, and a lot of people drop out. So we were like, oh, that sounds scary, but let's apply. So.
Yep, so Lightning Lab was a much more traditional incubator. They took 6% equity for a $20,000 investment and 4 months of intense on-site mentoring. The $20,000 is delivered in 2 tranches, so you get $10,000 at the start, and providing you meet all the criteria, you stay in the program, you don't do anything bad, you get $10,000 halfway through, and that's to fund your 3 to 4 months of living through the program.
So what was it like? It was excellent. It was exactly like that alumni had said. The first 5 weeks were just horrendous. It was basically, you started in the first week with a speed dating meeting where you met with 60 to 70 mentors. Out of those 60 to 70 mentors, you have meetings, 20-minute meetings with about 30 of them. Out of those 30 meetings and with mentors, you choose 5, which become your sounding board for the rest of the program. And if you want to get any work done, you need to do it outside of the hours of 9:30 and 5 o'clock in the afternoon, because your days will just be filled with meetings, more meetings, and workshops. And so it is really, really hard to get work done. You have to be really focused, but it is a tremendous experience and really, really great.
So $20,000, it sounds like a great amount of money. It disappears really quickly. We had 3 team members that we needed to support in Wellington, Mel, myself, and an intern who we had hired for the period. So there was living costs for all 3 of us down in Wellington. We had to relocate there for the duration. If you have less people in the program, or you can manage to find an accelerator in your hometown, obviously then you can put a lot more of that money into business costs, which would have been great. Yep. So the $20,000 will pretty much get you to the end of the accelerator period, at which stage you will need some further funding. Like I mentioned earlier, you will get a chance to pitch your idea to investors, but even if you have the best pitch in the world and you have a lot of investor interest, it will normally take a minimum of 3 months to see any money. So you need to bridge that gap between the end of the accelerator and getting some investment. For us, we spent a period of time during the accelerator to actually run a successful Kickstarter, and that's how we guaranteed ourselves a life after that.
So Lightning Lab gears you up for Demo Day, and Demo Day is basically the opportunity to put all the reasons why an investor should put any money into your idea into 8 minutes, into an 8-minute pitch. And everything in Lightning Lab is geared up to use the time that you have there to show traction, because it's all about traction. And during the time in Lightning Lab, we also have been told over and over again, as a gaming company, we're not going to be very successful in New Zealand trying to get money out of angel investors. We really should go to the States.
So with that in mind, pitching games is hard. Normally in your pitch you want to be able to deliver a successful formula, for example Uber, and you want to say we're going to be the next Uber. You need a successful formula, and this is how we're going to follow the formula, and this is why we're going to be successful. The problem with games is that there's not necessarily a successful formula for making a successful game. You may follow all the rules, you may do all the right things, and it may be a flop. So investors really don't like that. They don't like the risk associated with it. In saying that, there are some things that you can do to convince investors that you do know what you're doing. You will need to convince them that you have a good team. A team is the most important thing. They won't invest in a one-man band. You need to have 2 or more co-founders. The more you have, the better range of skills you can show, the more reliable you are, because if one co-founder leaves, your team's not going to fall over, and the more it shows that people believe in the idea. The second thing is traction. So as Mel said, traction. You'll spend a lot of time trying to prove that people want what you have, and this can be in the form of agreements with companies, it can be downloads, positive ratings and reviews, anything to show that people are going to buy your product. And you'll spend a lot of time in the accelerator actually proving that you have traction. And the third thing you need is a plan. And that's a plan for growth, a plan for scaling. Investors, they're only investing because they can make money from you, so you need to show that you're going to grow, and you need to show that you have a plan that's going to allow you to scale and grow. developing a game in your basement for 5 years is fine as a plan, but it's not going to make any investor a lot of money, so they're not going to be terribly interested in that.
So basically, once you have kind of, finished your incubator, the next thing that comes is that you pitch to angel organizations, and loads and loads and loads of them. And so that's what we've been pretty much doing since we finished in Lightning Lab. And so the way that kind of like looks with angel investors is, so angel investors are looking for their investment to come back tenfold. And so when you pitch to them, one of the typical questions is going to be, how are you positioning yourselves for exit? How are you positioning yourself for acquisition? Because that is when they get their money back tenfold. And so that is something you will have had to think about. How can you get your company acquired? Then the process continues. So let's say your angel investors are really interested in what you're doing and they've all voted yes. The next stage is that you need to find a lead investor. The lead investor will run the due diligence, which is quite a lot of work. It means that they get a look under the hood, they do an audit of your company. And that involves a lot of paperwork, and if you fail that audit of the company, then that's your chance blown with that angel organization. So you only get one chance at this. But because you have finished and graduated from an incubator, all of a sudden all sorts of doors open. So we get invited to really cool events. For instance, one of them is an angel at my table. So this kind of like looks in a way where, thank you. This basically looks like you have 3 angel investors who act as judges for 4 startups that are pitching 5 minutes each, their idea. You then get rated on, like which idea is best, and they have $5,000 that they divide between the startups. We were invited as the back team. Kind of like quietly sit in the back and, watch, and if anything goes wrong, we can jump in. To our surprise, we were asked in the break to do a 1-minute pitch, which we did, and to our bigger surprise, we walked away with the second biggest prize money that night, which was pretty cool. Another opportunity that we got out of graduating from an incubator was that we were invited to go and pitch to 500 investors in China, which is end of this month, which is quite exciting as well. So there's a lot of opportunities coming from being in an incubator.
So there are around about 130, 140 incubator accelerators around the world. There's heaps of choice. New Zealand does not have a gaming-specific accelerator, but I know there are people working on this. So really keep an eye on that space. Hopefully something will come up soon. Lightning Lab's probably the most well-known. Soda Inc., which is up there, is a different model which takes equity but only gives connections to mentors. It's all about matchmaking you with the best advisors and mentors internationally for what you're doing. Internationally, there are just so many accelerators out there when you start looking. So Techstars and Y Combinator are probably the 2 most well-known and established. Game Founders, Core Labs and Execution Labs are all gaming-specific accelerators, and they will give you up to $50,000 of investment, and they, I think it might be Execution Labs, I'm not sure. One of them specifically mentors you to produce a single title, so it's really an intense period of mentorship just to get your title out there, and if they like it, then they will invest in that particular game title. So if you have a look, there are a lot of opportunities to travel internationally, and those accelerators all accept international applicants, so there's no geographical restriction.
So with that, we're going to conclude the talk. We would like to tell you as well that we've recently been announced finalist of the Innovation Hero Awards, which is pretty cool, in the category of Innovation Excellence in Research. And yesterday we got an email that we've been nominated for the New Zealander of the Year award in the category of innovation. Is that right?
I think so.
Yeah. So that's pretty exciting.
Wow.
So yeah, we're quite stoked about that. And I guess now it's time for questions. Yeah.
When it comes to traction, when you don't have a lot of time or money or resources to build, especially because you have to move to Wellington, how did you try and measure traction, like when you didn't have much power to build anything? How did you manage that?
Do you want to
So
answer?
yeah, so there are a number of ways you can show traction without product. You can do user surveys, you can get user feedback forms, you can set up a Facebook group, you can get people to come to paper prototype, trials, anything that will demonstrate that even if you don't have a product, that when you do, people will buy it.
Right.
So that's and often you will be trying to prove traction before you have actually built a product, because a lot of the investment will be going into building your product.
I think what I'm going to add to that we found definitely a huge challenge with the formula of Lightning Lab was that they wanted you to sell a product to people and get people to pay for it before it was actually done. How do you do that with a game? How do you go with a game concept to somebody and say, I want you to pay $5 for this, it's going to be really fun. Are you happy to pay for it now? So this is the bit where we kind of like felt that the incubator structure was a little bit too rigid for us, and we basically, what it resulted in as well was that we pushed out a beta version really, really fast, probably way faster than Amy felt comfortable with, but we didn't feel we had a choice. Any other questions?
With the success of Pokemon Go, which is very much in the same space, you're going to use that for your ongoing pitches?
I can tell you that before Pokemon Go, when we pitched to angel investors, they would say, you know, like, nobody's going to do this. Nobody in their right mind is going to run around with a phone in front of their face, and outside they're going to look like idiots. Then fast forward that Pokemon Go happened, we had the same conversation with the same investors, and before I even said a word, I was greeted with like, right, tell us we were wrong, tell us we were wrong, all right. So it made a huge difference for a lot of us, you know, in the AR space to actually pitch. It makes it much, much easier now.
What do you think an incubator specifically for games in New Zealand would look like? What kind of elements would it have?
Well, I know that Stephen Knightley is pushing for one very, very hard. And I think one of the things that would need to be in there is like more on a focus on monetizing, you know, like within the game. There are so many different ways to monetize within the game. But it would also kind of like include that you have access to different mentors that are more specific to gaming. We actually brought a lot of our own mentors, didn't we?
Ask that, yes.
Yeah.
Because these incubators set up for business advice, and of course you also want advice on the game itself. So
Yeah.
were they able to bring in mentors for you to
Yeah.
say, you know,
But we
what's
brought
what?
a lot of our own because of our industry in connection. So Stephen Knightley is our lead mentor, Mario from Pickpock, Tim from Runaway. Then we had like Cerebral Fix, you know, like we pretty much, there were so many people from the industry here that were willing to get on the phone with us for like an hour or two and just advise us. So in that regards, I find New Zealand is just really great because people are so open to sharing their knowledge. Yeah.
I have another question. So business incubators typically try and get you to focus on this thing called a pain point, right? And I mean, I can kind of see what pain points you guys address, but for a lot of game developers, they're not really thinking about it in that way. They might be thinking about like, this is not really about a pain point, this is like, you know, fun. So how would you advise game developers to address incubators and that challenge of coming up with a pain point? Because they really encourage you to go for the, you know, aspirin rather than the vitamin, you know, like solve people's problems.
You want to talk about that?
Your
Okay,
area,
my area.
entertainment's
All right.
a bit of a
So basically, I mean, this what you're kind of like addressing was our first five-week nightmare. You know, the mentors that we met, and we met with so many. Every single meeting we had is like, you know, oh, you should be targeting adults instead of kids, and you should be targeting fitness studios instead of outdoor. And by the way, you should be indoor anyway. And so, you know, which included a completely different technology, and it moved away from the whole core mission. So we found it very, very difficult because it was all around, you know, like what's the pain point. But what we were able to say, and that was part of proving the traction, we were able to say that what we are doing is to get kids off the couch, active outside. Will parents pay for that? Because we're targeting parents, right? And that is really, really hard in itself. If you are targeting kids, if you're marketing to kids, or if you're marketing to parents, that is a real challenge in itself. So our pain point was that parents care about their kids sitting on the couch, and we had to prove that. And we were challenged to prove it by getting pre-orders of the game from parents and having parents say, I will pay for this.
And did you guys?
Actually, no, we didn't. We didn't. And that was part of, you know, like while the whole Lightning Lab demo day became a real headache, because when it came to putting the slides together and the pitch, what on earth are we going to put on there as traction?
Yeah.
And so we had to start getting creative with what we put on there. So we looked at what are we really good at? What do we know from our tests? We knew that just on a basic level of the game, the kids would play for 30 minutes. That was a huge plus, and people said, wow, that sounds pretty cool. We had managed because, so we planned our media campaigns in the sense that we pushed for being on television. And being on television and being in the news got us the #1 rating on the New Zealand Kids App Store. So things like that we were able to put on there. Now to an investor that doesn't mean anything, quite frankly. Investors would rather kind of like see, you know, a massive hockey stick in terms of downloads. So all we could say is like, well, you know, we've had some organic traction without massive marketing campaigns of 2,500 downloads, and that's it. But because of Pokemon Go, it surged enough interest that they could see the potential. And I guess then you have to be open to business conversations to say, how can we take the gaming concept that we have and build it to the same size as another very popular title? So for us, that means that we had to kind of like look at potentially abandoning our own IP, or for instance Sharks in the Park, and teaming up with a different kids brand. You know, so you look for business deals. You look for business deals that angels actually understand, and they think completely different. So you're absolutely right. But this is all stuff you learn during the incubator period, and basically you have 3 months' time to figure out how you can convince these people to give you money. And every pitch, you learn from the questions. You get an idea as to what answers or what information pushes buttons, and that's really how it goes. Yep.
You mentioned a period of time in which you had to bridge the gap between investments with a successful Kickstarter campaign. Since Kickstarter is kind of basically that, hey, you should give us money, it will be fun, and you'll get it later. Did that campaign really like add a lot of strength to your traction pitch, that you could show that, hey, people paid for this even though they couldn't buy it? And since you mentioned that startups like Chile, you had to have the cash up front, and some developers just can't. What would you say about just trying for a Kickstarter instead of a business incubator? Like, what's the difference between people who can't afford to pay for the whole, or the first months of the program?
So I mean, with the Kickstarter, that can go both ways. On one hand, we decided to say we ran a successful Kickstarter. We didn't want to talk about how many backers or how much we raised, because for a lot of angel investors was, yes, so what? They didn't actually buy into it as traction enough. It was just kind of like, okay, so you ran a successful Kickstarter. Doesn't mean anything to them necessarily. In order to kind of, you know, have the cash up front, I can tell you that some of the teams in Chile chucked it on the credit card, and that was really scary. But in general, what I can also tell you was that in an international incubator, the teams bond so strongly, so quickly, that, you know, if somebody got chucked out of the apartment, and that happened on a regular basis, somebody else would take them in. So we were a very tight-knit team. We would help each other out. Like, I remember that I was hosting the Christmas dinner because nobody had money, because we hadn't been reimbursed and we were all broke. And so I just invited everybody over and I said, let's have potluck dinner, because otherwise we're not going to have a Christmas at all. And that's just how it works, you know, and that's the community that you're in is so tight. They will help you, you know, so if you really run out of cash, it's not like you're completely stranded.
And I think you can choose the incubator, right? So,
Yeah.
so S Factory wasn't standard, and you will find incubators like Lightning Lab that will give you the cash up front. But Kickstarter is completely valid as well, if that's the way. And Kickstarter is such a good model for marketing, it's such a good model for validation. There's so many good reasons to do a crowdfunding campaign. It's just a matter of what makes sense for you at the time.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Quick question. Do you find when you're dealing with angel investors particularly that, you know, it's fun to talk about the concept, right, in the game, how fun it's going to be and everything else. Do you find that they really drill down on things like monetization strategies, financials, time to market, go-to-market plan, competitive analysis, you know, all that kind of stuff?
That's all they
kind
want
of
to know.
grilling on that?
That's all they want to know.
Yeah.
They're not interested necessarily in the fun factor unless you can prove why your game is going to be more successful than any other. In fact, the most common question we have been asked by mentors is, how are people going to find you on the App Store? You know, how are they going to be aware of you? There are so many titles out there. How are you going to make sure that people find you on the App Store? And that was a tough question for us, because at the beginning of the incubator, you don't have the answer. And I guess this is the fun thing about incubators, you know. At the beginning, you really feel like a rookie and you don't know, but over the time of the 3 months, you meet with so many people and you ask them the question, what do we do? How do we get found? And so you start to hone in on marketing campaigns, you start to hone in on and you get creative, you think out of the box, you know. So I can share one of my secrets with you. So I found testers and the biggest support from casting agencies. So I put an ad on a casting agency saying, I'm looking for kid testers, 6 to 11. I would like to be able to interview the parents. You know, this is the day we're going to do a film shoot, so we're going to do testing, but we're also going to film it. Who is interesting to come? And if you tell a kid that it gets to be a game tester, they all want to be there. So you get plenty of kids who are not only kind of keen to test your game, but you also get a lot of parents who become supportive. And if parents like your game, they become your brand champion. And sometimes you may be lucky and you have a parent that has got connections to the media. And so they will actively go out and pitch you to the media, to the radio, to television, and that's what happened to us. So we actually didn't have a lot of time to get engaged with marketing. We had a lot of the parents do it for us. Okay. Yeah.
Is there a risk that you eventually hit almost like an incubator accelerator fatigue? I mean, you've been through Lightning Lab, you've been through Chile version. I guess there's a temptation that you sort of keep trying to bounce from one incubator or support mechanism to the next. At what point do you determine that it's time to escape the clutches of the support industry and actually grow into your own fully fledged independent?
So S Factory was a pre-accelerator, so it got us ready almost for Lightning Lab, and then Lightning Lab was the accelerator. I think we wouldn't go into another one. Maybe we would consider a gaming specific one, because it can actually, the network that you can grow from an accelerator is probably the most valuable thing you'll get from it. And so it's not necessarily a support system, but a way of meeting people who are going to help in what you're doing. And saying that, Mel met quite a few people over in Chile who, what were they called? Those people who just jump between accelerators?
Incubator bitches.
Incubator bitches. And they do, they just, one after the other, and they go around and they have a great time. So
it's a lifestyle.
So that's certainly something which some people do, but I think you really need to make a strategic decision about what are you going to get out of that incubator, and you shouldn't use it as a clutch. If you have to use incubator money as a clutch, then I think you need to question your strategy.
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing is that eventually accelerators won't actually accept you anymore either, because when you hand in your application, they obviously do a little bit of digging on you, and if they find out you've already been through 2 accelerators, a pre-accelerator and an accelerator, then the first question is, why do you want to do another one? And if you don't have a good reason, then they obviously don't choose you. But you just reminded me to add something else in here, which I had conversations with people last night at the drinks. So when you do the application, in order to get chosen, here's a really important tip. So you have to put in, for every incubator, you have to put in a 2-minute video of the team talking. And so Amy and I, we obviously did that. We introduced ourselves. We talked a little bit about the product in 2 minutes. But the key thing that the incubators are looking for is that you're coachable. And so if in the interview, if you come across as not coachable and you're not going to take advice from the mentors, there's a good chance that you're not even going to get chosen. So if you want to be preferred in your application in comparison to other people, put in that one of the things you're looking forward to about being in the incubator is to be coached, to get advice, to listen to what other people have to say, what they have to add, their experience, because that is what they're looking for. It's not about your idea. They're not choosing people because of your idea. They're choosing you because of the team, and if the team is coachable. And that is the key, the most important message, really.
I think we should probably wrap up there. It's absolutely fantastic that you have shared so much information so frankly about this process. One of the things you mentioned was it's a characteristic of the industry here in New Zealand that everyone is very willing to share their learnings, and we're very, very grateful to you for doing so here. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
It's now time for lunch downstairs.
Yeah.